So, welcome everyone to Phoenix Conversations. This is one of a series of talks and discussions hosted by Pagan Phoenix Southwest. And this evening we are joined by four very eminent Druids, and I'm sure lots of you will recognise them already. So we've got Kristofer Hughes, Penny Billington, David Smith, and Kerry Lee. But rather than me introduce you, shall I ask you to introduce yourselves, say a little bit about your path in Druidry. So can I ask you to start, Penny?
Certainly. I'm a Druid author and speaker, and I've been around in OBOD particularly for a long time, and I wasn't particularly prepared to start. But like a good Druid, I look at a stone and I think, oh, in 100 years' time, it won't matter at all. So here we go. I've been around in OBOD for a long time, and I edit their magazine and have helped out with various events and things like that. And I just love the idea that Druidry can keep us completely grounded and yet allow us to access the spiritual through nature.
Thank you, Penny. Kristofer, how about you next?
Hello, everybody. Hope you're all well. I'm Kristofer Hughes. I'm up here on the island of Anglesey in North Wales. I'm the head of the Anglesey Druid Order. I'm a graduate of OBOD. I'm its 13th Mount Hema scholar, and I also write books, amongst other things, which we won't get to in this particular video. And for me, I've been a Druid for, I guess 25, maybe 30 years or so. And for me, I encapsulate my Druidry as that which transforms all of my anxieties into wondrous joy.
Thank you, Chris. And Dave and Kerry, you get the last spot.
You'll go first. You go first.
Okay. Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Kerry. I've been a Druid in OBOD for too long to even think about it. And I'm also part of the ADO, which is fabulous too. I love that breadth of experience and different ways of working with the same kind of themes. I guess my Druidry takes the form of natural communication and ritual. Ritual is my kind of complete heart's love, and working with all the realms. I mean, my favourite symbol is kind of Yggdrasil, reaching between all of the realms, which isn't particularly druidic, I understand. However, the theme just works. So yeah, that's me. I think I'm a tree, really.
Hello, I'm Dave. We have a third person in the room, Oscar, who could do anything, and you could hear anything, literally anything. So just if you hear anything in the background, it's our dog. He's also a Druid. I am Dave Smith. I think it probably says on the screen, Dave the Bard to a lot of people. I'm an OBOD Druid. My introduction to Druidry was through Hermetic magic and that kind of thing. But when I found a tradition that held creativity and I saw the path of the bard ahead of me, and the idea of the Awen and of divine inspiration, and when I looked deeper and found in deities that sprang from the very earth beneath my feet, that was when I fell in love with the path. And that was 250 years ago now, or at least it feels like it. No, that was a while ago now. And I am still very, very happy exploring this never-ending forest that is Druidry.
Thank you. That's lovely. Thank you, everyone. Well, tonight for our viewers, we're going to be discussing and reflecting on our pandemic experiences, whether or how it's changed our experience, the way we practice, the way we celebrate, the way we connect as Druids, and then looking forward as to whether those changes, if there have been any, how they will change us or have moulded us as we go forward, hopefully soon out of this whole year of lockdown. So I'm going to pick somebody different first. So Chris, take it away. Would you like to reflect back on this past year? Has it been a scary horror story, or are you going to have some positive memories? Has it changed you in your practice in any way?
I think it's been a mixture of both. I've been surrounded by the most dreadful horror and grief in my professional capacity as an autopsy technologist at the North Wales Autopsy and Bereavement Centre. And as you can imagine, I don't need to go into any particular details as to how harrowing that has been, and also how emotionally and mentally draining that whole experience has been in a global pandemic. And having to revert back to my Druid training, my Druid tools and my skills as a Druid has been challenged and really pushed in the manner by which we deal with the bereaved and deal with people's own sense of separation anxiety that the global pandemic has caused, and trying to find a way through that in a way that brings about some form of catharsis. And yet none of us have been trained to deal with that. None of us could have foreseen what 2020 was going to throw at us. And I have to admit to have come out of 2020 rather traumatized by my own professional experiences. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that I had a Druid community, albeit a virtual one, I'm not entirely sure how I would have coped. Many other people around me have not coped very well at all. Some have completely broken, and others, unfortunately, have died as a consequence of COVID-19. And all of those things have profoundly affected the way that I perceive and connect to my own spirituality. And one of the joys and the silver linings in all of it was we weren't able to participate or perform any of our civic or public ceremonies and rituals. We had to do it all entirely online. Now, our summer solstice rituals can probably pull around 250 or 300 people. And we had thousands of people who connected and watched us live, beaming the sunrise from the top of Mynydd Bodafon here on Anglesey. And I was probably the most cynical person to think that that's not going to work. It's never going to work. People aren't going to feel a sense of connection. And I was so wrong that this medium has caused us to see the world through very different eyes. I've now gone part-time in work from only this Monday just been. And I find that I'm spending more and more time using this medium, and that Druidry does actually transfer and broadcast across a digital conduit. And that I've found amazingly surprising, but also it's help me find solace. And when I find solace, I can help the people that I work with also hopefully reach some form of solace in the dreadful situations that people find themselves in. So never before in my entire professional capacity has my Druidry been so valid and vital to my career. And 2020 will be memorable, sometimes for all the wrong reasons, but also for quite amazing reasons in the way that we've connected with people.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And so it's been a mixture. It's been things to celebrate, wonderful new lessons learned, but also trauma. Thank you for sharing that. I should have mentioned at the start, folks, that don't wait for me. It's not like class. You have to put your hand up and talk in turn. If you want to butt in, just feel free to, if you want to add anything to what someone is saying. But thank you for that, Chris. So Penny, can I ask you, what's it been like the past year of the pandemic for you? What's been your experience?
It's been a really interesting time, and a time of very mixed feelings. I mean, I'm one of the older generation, and so is my husband, and we're the people who would have been shielded right at the beginning. So there was, we really were in lockdown, a lot of lockdown. But having said that, I'm really privileged. I work from home. None of my normal routines had to be too severely disrupted. So I was really, really lucky. I can write at home. I can edit a magazine at home. I can give online talks or talk to my grove online. So I've just been aware in the past year of incredible gratitude and being a really privileged person in being able to carry on the semblance of normal life, which is because of my home working has been centered around the home, when so many other people haven't. And I think that's also really increased my sense of empathy as well for so much. So I've got to balance this thing of being glad and really glad and grateful, and yet feeling immense empathy for people who've had it so, been in such difficult situations. Also because I know people on the front line of the NHS. It's like having a window into a different world because I've been safe in my home. And also I live in a beautiful place. So I have access to countryside and so on. It would be very different. Before I moved, I lived in a huge city with never a tree to be seen, and that would have been very, very hard. So when I look back, I'm just so thankful that all my immediate family, although some of them have had COVID, have managed to get through it all right, and that we've all managed to live and work and prosper and have our beings. And what I'm looking forward to is seeing what the new normal will be, because life will never, ever, ever be the same for any of us. So I'm looking, as a Druid, I'm looking forward rather than back at the moment.
So Penny, you mentioned that you can speak to your grove online, so even though you've been at home.
Yeah.
So have you had a sort of a similar experience to Chris in being able to partake in online rituals? Do you think that they've changed? Have they worked on an online medium?
I think most people who've tried to do spiritual things online have been surprised at how successful it can be. I think prior to this, we'd all have said, what? Druids like first-hand experience. We want to smell the earth. We want to get rained on. Some of us don't like it that much, but we know it's part of the deal. But actually, there's the interesting thing. A woman who was very good at ritual once told me, the more you can control around your ritual, the deeper the experience people can have. And actually, if you're all in your own homes, all controlling your own environment, it's a completely different experience, but it can still be a deep, you can have a deep experience. I always think the main thing, Cerri, you love ritual, so I don't know what you think about this, but my main thing in ritual is that it is an interface between the worlds, but the main thing is you are completely in the moment, completely. So you come out of ritual and think, wow, what happened there? Where did the time go? Because you were in other space. And I'm amazed that can happen even when you're connecting electronically to people. Have you found that as well? I presume that you've been doing online rituals as we have.
Yes, we've we had to do all sorts of stuff for the Gorseth, because we do regular festivals up on the hill, and we really had to get our head around the idea of how to still be there for the community, how to keep that sense of community when the whole place is kind of running in fear and terror of this dreadful little microscopic beast that sharp pointy teeth, and so it's been a revelation, actually, kind of challenging ourselves to really find that sense of community with this fantastic double-edged sword that is the internet. You know, it can be and was used for such appalling purposes over this past sort of 18 months, well, a few years really. But actually what's come out of this is the fact that actually people need a sense of connection, and it has been a really valid and positive force with bringing like-minded people together so that they can still share a ritual, share space, and be together, even if it's only in 2D. You know, it's become a thing with us. It's kind of like, oh my God, I can see you in 3D. That's
Yes,
just really...
your head is round.
Your head is round, not flat. So yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, but there's also this thing of the new normal and people's new expectations as a result of it, because the OBOD big handover of the chosen chiefship, of course, had to happen virtually. Dave, you sort of masterminded some magical ceremony in order for that to happen. And then I got a call from a member a few months later saying, well, what about midwinter then? You've done midsummer. And suddenly we're thinking, we've raised the bar. People's expectations have changed now. We realised that so many people who are not very mobile or can't travel great distances or whatever are excluded from ritual. Now that we've included them, I don't think we can ever go back to pushing them out the door and saying, oh, sorry, we're not going to do that anymore. It's really been an amazing learning curve, because I read on Facebook this really interesting comment. Someone had put, oh, I hate this lockdown. I just want to be spontaneous. I want to go out when I want to go out, and all this sort of thing. And someone underneath wrote, well, I'm disabled. Welcome to my world. And I thought that was very salutary, you know, that there are all these, a lot of people with hidden disabilities and things, people who are living their lives authentically and would never ask for special treatment or complain or anything like this, but they just have to select out because they can't climb a tor, travel long distances or whatever. And it felt rather nice to be able to include all them and set up their expectation that we will continue to do so.
And their possibilities and access to educational material as well has been amazing. So many people that I've presented at a number of conferences over the last 12 months, conferences that I would never have been able to have got to in person, but so many other people couldn't get there either. And the feedback that's come from that connection and that sense of being able to get something and access something that people weren't able to previously is an amazing thing. And what I've noticed as well is I'm speaking at the UK Tarot Conference in October, which hopefully will happen in London in person. But there's also an expectation that it will also happen simultaneously online. And that's interesting. And that we've moved in the new world, we'll have physical gatherings possibly, hopefully, very soon. But they'll simultaneously be broadcast by using this medium. And of course, we've not done that before. And that's a rather exciting thing. And I think we're going to see skill sets that people have had that maybe they never dreamt that it could be used in their druidry and their expression of spirituality. And we're going to need all these technical folk to be able to help us speak to people through this thing. And I find that there's a profound magic to that. And it's very unexpected and I love it.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I need to share a sort of a different angle on what Penny's been saying about people who are interested in a druid spirituality or another spirituality. Maybe they're a bit shy, they're a bit anxious. You know, it takes a lot of nerve to walk into a ritual or a moot or a meeting, you know, because you think, am I wearing the wrong thing? Will I not know the words? Will I stand in the wrong place? Or even worse, will I stand there and look like a lemon all by myself all the time? And I think it's really worked well for that. So I went to a Holocaust Memorial Day thing. I was invited along by the local Cornish Jewish community. I get invited along all the time. But this time, of course, it was held on Zoom. And 172 people rocked up. Normally, they'd be lucky to get 40 because there's not many Jews in Cornwall, and a few odd people like me. And of course, there were people who were elderly, people who didn't want to drive in the dark on a winter's night, who live a long way away. But interestingly, there were lots of non-Jews there. It was a much broader remembrance of genocide because you had people of many more faiths came along. And I wondered whether that online medium made them feel more confident rather than going along to what they might have seen as quite a strange or unfamiliar religious ceremony where they'd be afraid to, sit in the wrong place or say the wrong thing. So I think, there's enormous possibility in broadening the sort of understanding between faiths, perhaps the understanding of our faith, because it makes it perhaps more accessible to people if they can join something online. But before I get carried away, we haven't heard from Dave yet about his reflections on the year past.
Okay, yes, myself and Gary. The reflections on the year past. Okay, so it was a very sudden change. Before the first lockdown, particularly from May through to October, maybe November, almost all of my weekends were somewhere else. They were at a conference or a camp or somewhere, or the Andera de Gorseth ceremonies on the hill, or the Obod's gatherings or whatever. And I was hugely busy. And then suddenly the lockdown arrived, and every single event I had on my calendar within a minute disappeared and went. And and at first I was very scared, because obviously, I'm a professional musician as well as everything else. So that's how I earn my living as well. And that went. All my gigs went. Luckily, I was putting the finishing touch on an album, which still came out. But what was actually fascinating for me is I realized that before lockdown, almost all of my Druidry was going that way. It was for the community. I was in constant service to the community. I was doing open rituals. I was doing conferences. I was doing camps. I was doing the Obod summer and winter gatherings. I was organizing all these things, and it was all outwards. And I realized that for a number of years, I hadn't spent much time on my own personal relationship. It had always come second to everything else. And of course, when nothing was there, also overnight, I suddenly started seeing the herb plants in the bank that were calling to me for incenses. I noticed more of the birds that were singing around, that were going around. I stopped driving my car, and I started exploring, and this is something that Chris says, is like my own square mile. And I literally stopped traveling and thought, right, well, what's down here? And I found literally on the road down from my house some steps going down into the harbour, which had been there for 20 years. Well, they've been there for longer than that, but I've been here for 20 years and never even walked down there. And I found this bank full of wild flowers and herbs that I started to harvest and talk to and get to know. I got my old wildflower and Richard Maybe's Food for Free out, and I was kind of like looking at what was growing there and stuff like that, and bringing some of them home, drying them on my altar for incenses. All the things that I did years ago that I'd stopped because I didn't have time to think about my own relationship with everything. And that was such a delight. And I really reconnected with my own Druidry very quickly. And that's been good. The other thing that happened is that I realized that I wouldn't be playing live. And I thought, well, let's have a go. I'll do a Facebook gig, and I just announced a Facebook Live house concert, and what I realized was that it could never replace a live show. So I didn't, there wasn't any lights, there wasn't going to be a PA system, there wasn't going to be a live audience. It was never going to be able to replace that. But a few years ago, I did a house concert tour where I basically said, if you can get 15 of your mates around, I'll come and play a concert in your home, in your front. And what I found was people invited their mates, and I ended up playing in gardens, and people had barbecues and everything. It was great. And I thought, well, I could do that. I could replicate that. I could come to your home and I could sit in your home and play music like I'm sitting on your sofa, completely acoustic, very informal, and we'll have a go at that and just see how it goes. And I could not believe it. The first show came along and there were over 1,200 people watching live, you know, and I said, well, you know, all of the gigs have disappeared. This is a free concert, but if you can stick something in the tip jar, like that's how you do your house concerts, you just pass a jar around. Yeah, that'd be very appreciated. And people, you know, were generous and everything. And so I thought, well, we'll do another one. And I realised that this was something else. And the same thing with Open Rituals. I found that I had people watching my show who have loved my music for years, who could never get a chance to see me live, and they now can. You know, I can now play for them live in their rooms, in their homes, and it's been a complete and utter eye opener for me. I didn't think it would work either. I thought music streamed live on Facebook would just be flat and horrible, and it's not. And what's amazed me more than anything, I guess, is the amount of chatter that goes on. You know, people are meeting up with their mates. It's like they're saying, you know, instead of saying, I'll see you down the pub later, all these people from all over the world are saying, oh, I'll see you at Dave's gig later, and we'll chat on Facebook, you know, and it's just been amazing. But the other knock-on effect of that, one more, and I'll shut up. The other knock-on effect of that is that although I finished the Third Branch album, and I said, right, after this, I'm going to write a song album, what I've realized is my inspiration comes from community. My inspiration comes from observing. I mean, it's what a lot of artists do, right? You observe, you listen for that little phrase that a pagan will say and go, oh, that'd make a nice song. And of course, none of that's been happening. So there I was, fully expecting to use this time creatively to write new songs, but because I'm not meeting people, that inspiration to write those new songs hasn't been there. And it also it's shown me another strength of community and the value of meeting up in person with people, sitting around campfires, sharing a mead, you know, and that kind of thing. And without that, a bard is a poet in his living room telling himself stories. Mm-hmm. You know, and it doesn't work. You need other people as a bard. You can't do that on your own. So I am very much looking forward to whatever this new normal is, and actually getting out and hearing people's voices that aren't coming through my computer screen or on my computer microphones. I think that's it for the time being. Kerry, what about, yeah.
Yeah, I guess.
How's your?
Is that my review? I'm a bit like Penny, actually. My basic routines are not very different. Again, I work from home. I do, you know, all of that stuff. Again, I felt incredibly privileged to have that sort of security, and very, very grateful. And I think the thing that I've found was the inspiration that people have kind of found the same as I have in immersing myself in my tiny garden and my allotment, which I am incredibly fortunate enough to be able to just walk around a corner to. And that simple act of being able to go out into a safe space where there is no, you know, it's quite safe, it's quite secure for me, and keep my bargains with the earth and keep my connection to the land, and to actually intensify that, to actually bring that even more. It's kind of solidified a thing that I have been working towards, which is to have my food more local. It's to have my whole life be under my own auspices, rather than feeling like I'm reliant on, you know, apart from the seed companies, obviously, who have made a fortune out of me and continue to do so, you know, that there is a sense of positivity that I've had to really kind of invest in order to stay sane. You know, the amount of people that I have spoken to over this time who are, and me also, it's like the lack of physical contact with people. It just kind of, it makes me well up even at this particular point. And, you know, we have to kind of look at the darker side of this as well as all of the positives that are coming out of this. This has been incredibly traumatic for people. I have kind of spoken with and seen responses, and it's affected me quite deeply, kind of wanting to reach out and pull people away from a primal kind of fight or flight response to all of the craziness that's going on when you are looking at your mortality. I mean, Chris will know this better than anyone else here. You know, there is a sense of fear and a sense of claustrophobia and a sense of terror that goes with that makes people behave in some unbelievably appalling ways and speak to each other in dreadful ways that they would never do if they were face to face a lot of the time. And I found that has shaken my kind of confidence with the general populace quite a lot. And I think that's the thing that I've been left with, is the fact that there's a lot of pagan people who, because they are not secular, because they have a very strong axis mundi around which they hang their life experience, that keeps them, you know, from being too far, where rather than, you know, an old creaky oak that will fall in a gale, we're like the reed bending and moving and going, wow, that was a bit of a bastard, let's bring it back, you know, excuse my language, sorry. But it's, you know, secular life is falling apart. However, pagan, druid, witch, whatever path you follow, you draw into that, or Christian or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist, whatever path you follow. If you have a strong axis mundi, if you can keep hold of that, and if you can kind of find new rituals to express that stuff and to bring all of those experiences, good, bad, ugly, you know, dynamic, you know, epiphanies or whatever, and cradle them in something that gives life a solid meaning, then we will come out of this okay, and we will be able to help others come out of this okay. You know, that, as Chris was saying earlier, you know, his Druidry has helped him, you know, help the people around him. And I think that's really important. And for me, it's that's there's always that sense of my Druidry is your Druidry. It's an arms around the world thing to bring people's mental health and their spiritual health into harmony, despite the dreadful stuff that people have had to face. And I think that the new normal is going to be more inclusive. And my feeling from that is, whilst my life didn't change ostensibly, my commitment to all of the things that have always been important to me has grown and become, you know, something more and something more important to express. I think that honest expression helps people to be honest themselves and to share those experiences, good, bad and indifferent. And, you know, I really hope, I mean, I know that we will still would do a lot of the online stuff and keep that aspect up, because there are a lot of people who were excluded, you know, as we were saying. And those kinds of things have become even more important to me. So, and finding, yeah, like I say, I'm a bit of a ritualist. Everything turns into a ritual. It's all about narrative, isn't it? We are narrative beings. We live our whole lives telling ourselves stories, making things fit into stories. And the narratives that will come out of this will be interesting, you know, and they will be deep and they will be soulful, as well as people running around like chickens with their heads cut off and going and screaming, you know. But when they stop screaming and there's still people there standing there going, yeah, that was awful. That was really horrible. But, you know, let's sit down and talk about it, because we can, you know, that for me is, I'm looking at that future bit. I'm also looking for when I can just bloody hug people. I just have never missed human contact. And I'm a complete isolationist, I'll have you know. I generally, I'm like, you know, people can stay away. I'm all right on my allotment. But actually, I just want to hug the whatsits out of everybody. And also, local stuff. We talk to our neighbours even more. People need to talk to each other. That's a positive that's coming out of that I'm seeing every day, and thinking there are good things to come out of trauma. There's always good things to come out of this stuff. And I think the thing that I'm thinking is, we can't just relax when it's done. You know, that's something, you know, I've faced my mortality. I'm looking at it going, you've procrastinated far too long, lady. Get yourself sorted out. So I've been getting fit slowly. I've been doing the allotment. I've been committing to these things, and I've been finishing things. And I'm not going to stop doing that. And if anybody needs the help with that encouragement, I'm all there with you.
Mm. I think one of the things before was when the pandemic arrived, like a lot of people, I kind of, you know, I've got to that age where I'm going, always, you know, is that feeling okay and all that kind of stuff, and should I go and see the doctor? And suddenly, you know, being asthmatic, there was something out there that could actually potentially get me. And I looked ahead and I saw the changes that were coming, and I went into the garden and I did a little ritual I do each morning. And then I said, if there really is something out there can get me, and it might get me, then I am absolutely, you can stuff it. If you think I'm going to spend the last few months of my life depressed, you can just go and just stuff it. That's not going to happen. I am going to make the most now of every single minute of my life, because I now do not know if it's going to be imminent that it goes away. And on the whole, I've been okay. I mean, you know, we all slip, right? We all slip, and I have kind of got days where I've just burst into tears like everybody else. But then I remember that day, and I remember that commitment. I say, no, you are not going to do this. You're going to make the most of every minute. So yeah.
Can I come in and mention a strength of Druidry, and which is, of course, having an animist belief. Although we all obviously miss human contact, and some of us have even been forced to hug our spouses for lack of anyone else, you know, that's the way life goes sometimes. But what it gives us is a sense of perspective, a larger sense of perspective, because if you believe in an inspirited world, I mean, it was well pre-pandemic that I learned that a horse chestnut will listen to you for a long time. If you stomp off in a great big sulk and just sit underneath it, you know, it won't answer you back like the family. It will just absorb and listen, you know. By the time you've had a little conversation with the tree, you wander back thinking, well, everyone else is crazy and horrible, but maybe I am a bit as well. And you get your sense of perspective back. And I think, Dave discovered his steps, his 20 steps. I discovered a new path through my woods. There's a stream very near my house. I talk to it almost every day. I've lived here over 10 years. It's just revealed what I should have been calling it all these years, which is not its given name on the map, So you have to do these things regularly and with commitment in order to strengthen a connection that's really all important, because we are all supported by the living earth, and we are all human people, and they are tree people and stone people and river people and sea people, and we have between us got the levels and the downs and the mountains as our resources, to fill our spirit and refresh us. And that really does help us to be of balance, and keep our sense of perspective, and therefore be of service. That's it. I have spoken. Chris, you speak.
Perspective is something that I've been getting in bucket loads over the last year. And one of them in particular that I found quite striking is that I've been dealing directly with COVID-19, and essentially what I've been dealing with, as well as other people who work in the health service, is an organism that takes over the planet completely, only for its own volition. It only has its own survival in mind. It consumes all of its resources, and it destroys the host unbeknowingly, not realizing that it's damaging itself. And that's caused me to think, does that remind you of someone? Human beings, we act in exactly the same way as a virus. There is nothing about us that behaves any differently to any one of the family of coronaviruses. And wandering around this landscape, and apart from going to work and doing some shopping for my 94-year-old grandmother, we haven't broken the rules. We've stayed here, we've walked. Luckily, we live on the western coast of Anglesey, right next to the sea and some amazing forests. And having to focus on our square mile has caused a profound change in me. And it reminded me, especially in late spring, do you remember we had the most glorious weather at the height of the first lockdown? And it reminded me so much of the wasteland in the third branch of the Mabinogi, where every single human being was missing, and yet there was good hunting, good fishing. Everything grew. There wasn't desolation. The only thing that was missing was people. And Manawydan had to focus inwardly to try and discover what was going on and solve his own problems. And I've found that process immensely cathartic to give me some perspective as to how I tread on the earth. And I've not been treading that lightly. And that's caused me to worry about my own actions since the pandemic started. And in a way, I have coronavirus and COVID-19 to thank for that. And whilst it is dreadful and it only has its best interest at heart, we also have to stop and sometimes honor the animistic principle that exists even within SARS-CoV-2, the virus name for that particular disease-causing pathogen. It too is alive, and we must respect and honor our relationship with it, lest it undoes us and causes our own undoing. And the trauma that I've felt, the land has helped to ease that trauma. I've not been so creative, though. That's the one thing I've found during the course of the pandemic, is I've not been able to write very well. I struggle. I'm tired. My brain is exhausted. And like Kerry said, without somehow the encouragement of other people, and you know what pagans are like when we gather in a place, whether it's just in each other's homes or in a conference, and there's this flowing and we're gassing away. There's so much inspiration that bubbles up from those. encounters, from those experiences that go to inspire those of us who are bards and artists and creators. And that has been missing, and I'm hoping that that does return, But perspective, it's a big word, and it's a loaded word during this strange period. And I think there's still a lot to learn.
Well, that's been really interesting. That's sort of different aspects of it. So the sort of solace and the strength and the comfort that our Druidry brings, that sort of opportunity for self-healing, I think that Dave spoke about was really good. That sort of enforced, you will stop rushing around doing things and you will take the opportunity to look after yourself. And in looking after yourself, you're looking after your neighbours and you're looking after your own square mile, and then you're looking after the wider world, which I think
that's very important, isn't it? The wider world, because I think we were all aware, especially in the first lockdown, when no one was allowed to drive and everyone honoured that. Was the bird song louder? Was it just that there was the lack of traffic was wonderful, and you didn't know whether the birds were really happy or whether they also always sang that loud and you just didn't realise. But I think anyone who espouses a nature religion realised just how much the earth needs this time just to recover from our constant bloody onslaught of noise and rubbish, that we pour into it every single day. So I don't think this has necessarily been bad for the living earth, if you can say that. And I think it's good that we can appreciate its beauties because we've been through this. It's a very salutary lesson for us all, I think. But going forward, Druids will always have this balance, which is we're not trying to escape living in the real world, the world of the 21st century. There are a lot of bad things in the world of the 21st century, and that means we get our opportunities to go and to do things and to be of service to people in one way, maybe not in service to the world in another way. But one could get into all sorts of arguments that would last all night about that. Every single person to whom this is important makes their own balance, their own decision, takes responsibility for themselves, doesn't have to explain or justify it to anyone else. But we've all thought a little more deeply about it because of this, I think.
Yes, I think it's helped some of us realise, the interconnectedness of things, how we rely on people. I'm on my own, and I have been on my own for very, very many months, and I am really desperate to go and hug someone because there isn't anybody here. So, I mean, it's given us a long time for reflection on what's important, on priorities. But I think one thing that was interesting, all three of you touched on it. I've heard discussion that when it comes to ritual, when it comes to celebration, that being in the actual place is important. So, unless you're standing at Stonehenge or Avery or wherever, you can't really do the summer solstice properly. You can't do it in your front garden or out the field in the back like I do. But it's interesting that you're all, as I've experienced myself, that actually online ritual, there can be a connection, because perhaps when we're in those big gatherings, we're connecting with each other, and we can do that via a screen as well. And actually, perhaps one piece of the earth can be as sacred as another piece of the earth, even if it's not quite so beautiful. Maybe, it's an unmown lawn or a field full of brambles, but you can still have that meaningful ritual even if you've only walked 50 yards to your back field and that's as far as you can get, which is really interesting, because I have seen some discussion to say the opposite, which leads us nicely into the having looked back, the looking forward bit. So we've already touched on things like increased inclusivity, how, people who can't travel a long way away, who are elderly, we're, I think, all much more aware of those people with disabilities, whether they're visible or not, how it can be more inclusive. But going forward, do you think, what's going to happen on June the 20th, for summer solstice? Is there going to be 50,000 of us rushing to Stonehenge, or have we learnt perhaps that we have more options for us? Is there going to be, are we going to bounce back from the pandemic? Because lots of other pagans I've spoken to, they've lived alone like me. One day when we're allowed to go and walk up to somebody, when we haven't got little arrows telling us where to stand on the floor in the supermarket or reminding us to wear a mask and all this sort of thing, will we be able just to snap back into rushing into a room full of 300 druids and hugging them all? Or are we going to have to have a very complicated etiquette about hugging and sharing a chalice and all those sorts of things? So, what are your thoughts about going forward?
I think when you come out, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. When you come out of any restricted situation, I mean, I don't know from personal experience, but I'm going to cite prison as an example. But it's these things of being by yourself and isolated and having fear. They're incredible confidence knockers, and you don't just bounce back from that. I was speaking to a musician who said they didn't know whether they'd ever feel happy, playing to a huge auditorium ever again, seeing a mosh pit, with the same glee and joy, that meant, hey, I'm doing well tonight. I don't think, I wonder, I mean, with Druidry, I think we always try and encourage small and local, rather than wanting always to be global and get that. It's not the more the merrier. It is the more the merrier, but it's not the more the better. I just think it's going to take a long time to click back into what people feel comfortable with. But I will say this, and I'll say it for Cerri, because she says she's a standoffish sort of person, and so indeed am I. There has become a fashion of gratuitous hugging has grown up in the pagan community, which I know a lot of people subscribe to, but don't feel that comfortable about. And I just think, I said the other day, and I think someone didn't know how to take it, when I said, maybe this proves that God is, we won't say God is here because that would be disrespectful, but God is English, because we're going to get back to a stiff upper lip and a firm handshake. I think we're going to become more discriminating, shall we say, in our friendships and our rituals, in our interaction with people. And I think the people we hug will be the people that we love, and not just because they're on the end of the line and we don't know how to stop now. It would be embarrassing. So we've got some interesting challenges ahead.
Penny, I have to disagree with you in as much as I will be completely indiscriminate and I'm going to hug everybody regardless of whether they want to hug me or not, because I'm very needy right now.
Oh, well, I'll be first in the line then, Cerri. Always.
Do I think we're going to be living with COVID-19 for a very long time. And we're going to have to adjust to a world that has other very powerful occupants living in it. And that we are for a while going to be somewhat at its mercy. Yes, we're going to be vaccinated, and we don't know yet whether we're going to need to be vaccinated every year, similar to with influenza. So we're going to have to modify and change our behavior to accommodate another life form that has said, I'm living here. Tough. I'm going to live here. You're just going to have to live with me. And we're going to have to learn to do that. And I think our behaviors will have to be modified slightly. But I think as more and more people are focusing locally, they also come to the realization that when you focus locally, you can influence globally. You can do so much just through this medium to inspire other people. And I think as Druids, regardless of what future we have with COVID-19, we are still inspirational people. At the very heart of our Druidry is the principle of inspiration. And the world needs that now more than it ever needs it, but also we need it. And sometimes I think we forget that we need to feel and be inspired so that we can inspire other people. And I don't know what face that's going to take as we move into 21 and 22. but it's going to be challenging and interesting. But I think more than anything, we're just going to have to learn to adapt and also modify the way that we live, and maybe think about the way that we live and the way we interact with other people. And whether, I'm fully vaccinated now, I've had my 2 jabs, but that doesn't mean that other people are safe from me. So I still have to be conscious of other people's safety and well-being. I've seen what this does to perfectly healthy people as well as elderly and vulnerable. And living with it and finding pearls of inspiration is all I think we can do going forward from this point on. Hopefully, who knows, there might be some miracle awaiting us later in the year. Time will tell, I guess.
When the first lockdown hit and we realized that we couldn't go, by the way, this weekend is the weekend that I played my last chord in front of a live audience that I could see and hear, and the last chord I played was B minor of Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. And I'll never forget that moment, and I'm looking forward to it again. But when it carried on, just a quick memory there. Oh, that was so nice. When there were people who were quite pushy in saying, no, we can go and hold an open ritual, and we kind of said, and it was one of those moments when you realise that the buck stops with you as an organiser.
Yeah.
That other people can have that opinion, but they're not the ones who are making that decision. And so we made the decision we just stopped.
Yeah. And
I think it was the proper decision. And then what we did, Kerry's the main writer of our ceremonies at the Hill, at the Long Man of Wilmington, which is where we held the Gorseth. And for a while, we absolutely held off Zoom live ceremonies.
Yeah.
What Kerry did is wrote a ceremony that everyone could do in their own gardens at the same time, and then post photographs of us all doing the ceremonies in our gardens. And that was fine for a while. And then I think the first one we did on Zoom was Samhain, because it felt like a ceremony where on the Hill that we could replicate. Yeah. In a Zoom situation. And it was different. I mean, the Druid's prayer and the Arwen's, you've got to do it on mute. It sounds terrible otherwise. But it proved that it could be done. But the thing that occurred to me as the year went on and looking forward is the things that make up Druid ritual, in fact, a lot of pagan ritual, Wiccan as well, is holding hands. Yeah. Well, that was out of the window. You couldn't hold hands in a circle. Sharing food and drink, sharing a chalice of wine or of mead or of juice, passing it around a circle. Can you imagine? We've been doing that for years with not even a second thought of all of what was like that soup that we might have been drinking. But suddenly there's no way you could do that. Even handing around biscuits of people's hands, going into a bowl of biscuits, and that couldn't happen. And then not only the holding hands, but the Awen, that breath of 50 people into a circle doing the Awen together, all that breath going out there and stuff, and then the hugging and everything, and I realised that a lot of what makes up community open ritual we couldn't do anymore. We could get up on the hill, but we had to stay 2 meters apart. Well, we couldn't hug, we couldn't share food and drink. We couldn't, and looking forward, that's going to have to be down to decisions again. It's like, when are we okay to hold hands in a circle again? When are we okay to share a chalice around a circle, or that food? And it also has a knock-on effect to I'm looking at the winter gathering for Obod, and I'm thinking, well, we can't have a buffet because buffets are out of the question now. So everyone who comes to that, if we do one, is going to have to go off to Glastonbury and hope they can find a table at a restaurant somewhere. Because you can't do that. It's changed a lot. And the other thing I realise is at some point in history we had the bubonic plague.
Yes.
And we got over that. Do you know what I mean? So although, and we I think human beings, we have this idea of what constitutes a long time. And obviously that is in relation to our own lives. And there will be a time where this is just something we live with, like a cold or whatever. I'm sure it will just become a part of life. Not for a while, but I'm sure it will happen. So I look forward and I can say, yes, people will be in mosh pits. Musicians will be playing gigs to 10,000 people in stadiums, and everyone will be standing shoulder to shoulder and singing at the top of that voice. That absolutely will come back, because that's what nature does. It just sorts itself out. But immediately we have to, like you say, live with this thing in a different way, and that's just going to, I think that's literally just going to be, you know, one of the things that I decided of living in the moment. I think that's the only thing you can do right now. You have to live in the moment. And I'm looking at June the 21st, and I'm thinking they're saying June the 21st, but the furlough scheme is carrying on till September. All right, well, what's that? You know, that's kind of covering your eggs there a little bit there, that it might not quite go as to plan. So I'm just watching this place, but in my heart, I know it will all be okay. It's just, you know, we have a problem looking that far in the future, and we can only look a year and think that's a long time, but actually it isn't in the scheme of life and everything going forward, you know. So,
but it is about adjusting, and the thing about, I'm sorry to keep going on about ritual, but it is such a big part of what we all do and how we make sense of things. Our narrative changes and adapts, as it always has done throughout the generations, to what is needed at that time. And what is needed at this time is for our communications through rituals, through the things that the people who put on rituals do, is to adapt, keep people safe, but keep them connected.
Yeah.
So it is going to be up to us to adapt those rituals, to make them relevant for the moment, to make the best we can possibly make out of every part of what we've learned at this particular point. And I think we can only grow out of that. You know, there are going to be ways that we can creatively share a meal. You know, even if everybody has to bring their own stuff and keep it in front of them, that's fine. You're still together in that space and you're safe. And it is about caring. If my prayer for all of this going forward is that we stop being quite so self-oriented. I don't mean that to sound selfish. That's not what I mean. But people in the modern world have become very insular and self-oriented, and this is why they've had trouble dealing with the way things have gone, because they've become so self-oriented that they have no idea how to actually care for each other anymore. And my hope is that actually what will come out of this is people will understand that actually there is a way to be a society again, you know, and a wider society, and that we can actually care for each other with so much more creativity than we've had before, because we now know that actually we blooming need each other. Yeah, do you know what I mean? And that's our neighbours, our, you know, people we don't even know. You know, it's like the chap walking past with his lovely little rescue dog yesterday. You know, it's like, I have no idea what his name is, but I know the dog's name's Pippa. But we stood and talked to him for 10 minutes, and it was lovely. And he only lives across the road. And
it's a really, really interesting thing, isn't it, Kerry, that ever since the 60s, you know, I mean, you know, since I was 7, I've been waiting for the bloody age of Aquarius, you know, hey, everything's going to be great. That is the age of individuation, you know, and actually it's the Druid balance, you know, we have to have people who feel socialized enough to look after themselves and look after their community. I don't ever want to go back to the old, post-war tribal days where if you didn't fit in, your life was a living hell. But there is a middle way. I think we've got a real challenge not with public rituals, because you can just lay down the rules and take responsibility and feel that they're sensible. But when you have a grove of people that you know well, they all have different perceptions. And as we go forward, some will be much more comfortable earlier going back to start doing things, and we have to respect all of them and include all of them. And I think that is going to be a major problem, especially if you get older people or people who've been shielding people with a particular health complaint. Are you going to have an open ritual, a ritual on your land, and then just say, well, tough luck, you can join us in 6 months when you're happy? I don't think so. But there's going to be a lot of accommodations to be made privately in groups with people who know each other well in the whole pagan community, I think. And that we'll respond to that creatively as well. When I want to make the point, because we all seem to be so happy with Zoom and virtual things, I'm sure we're all the same in that although we do our rituals on Zoom, we don't do them without going out to the land privately first, without making a connection to the land. And I mean, what some of our grove always go to the place we're not allowed to meet up at the moment, because it's that particular piece of ground that has witnessed all of our rituals, so that if we do a visualization together, that is where we go together. So there is a very real feet and hands on the land connection behind all this virtual Zoom stuff. And I think that's vital for Druidry.
I think that's all lovely. I mean, some and very inspiring words from Carrie at the end. But I think that recognition by Penny, that I think we'll all recognise that there will be some tensions going forward. I think there'll be many people who are, disabled, older, frailer, who will very much want to cling on to having Zoom rituals, online rituals, to stay connected in the way they've been this past year, and they'll be reluctant to lose that. But there will be people who say, well, we just need to go back to the stone circle. We need to go back to wherever we normally meet. And there will be that tension. But I think, summing up from what we've said, that this period of self-reflection and self-rejuvenation, this going back to our Druid roots for sort of solace and strength, hopefully will support us going forward to, continue to care for each other, to be of service to each other, because I think that's been a big theme of the pandemic, this idea that we care for our community, we care for our neighbour, we check up on them, we're careful, we wear a mask, we wash our hands because we care for other people. And that whole year of practice of caring for strangers, hopefully, will go forward with us. I spent the first 3 months of lockdown in New Zealand, so I had a very different experience to you. And the slogan in New Zealand was "Be kind." And we practiced kindness to people. So I walked around the block every day, 4.5 miles. I met the same couple going the other way every afternoon. And we would be kind to each other and said kia kaha and greeted each other. And we were kind to each other. And I hope that we've had a whole year of practice of being kind, and we will take that forward. What's going to be a very exciting year. But unless there's any final words, I know we're running way over time here. I knew I wouldn't get you to stop talking.
Just have one little thing that going forward again is that the camps and conferences, particularly here in the UK, for many years now have been run by the same generation of people. And I think that now those camps and conferences have almost had potentially 2 years off. I do wonder whether or not those people might just go, do you know what? I'm done. I'm not gonna do it anymore. And if that is the case, I hope that there are people who will then step into new shoes and start new things up, because there hasn't been new camps and conferences in the pagan community for many years. It's always been the same ones every year. And I think maybe this might be the opportunity for the next generation to step forward and do things their way, and for something else to happen. And the other thing is that, you know, some events that have been forced online might just go, do you know what? We'll stay online.
Yeah.
You know, there's no reason why we have to get a marquee in a field in the freezing cold and rain and, you know, everything else. We'll just carry, you know, we had more people when we did it on Zoom, you know, and it might end up that that's the way it happens. And it'll be just, you know, I'm a Gemini. I like to look at things and I like to think, and it'll be just very interesting to see how that all develops. But my hope is that new ideas might come from this in the kind of fallow ground that has been left for the last couple of years. And also that some of them go, yeah, no, we'll come back and we'll do it again. But we don't know, do we? We'll have to see. Yeah.
And you know, we're all resilient as well. We're all really resilient. We're all like Anglesey trees. We walk out of the wind, you know?
Yes.
And whether things are virtual or anything, I also just want to say that I really miss you all. I really want to touch you. And all of the people who are watching this that I know, I miss you all really so much. It's quite painful. And, you know, being a tactile, huggy person, and I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to be that person in the future. And but I hope that at least some of you I can touch again and smell and listen to and be in your presence. And I miss you all hugely.
Virtual hugs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Virtual
Yeah.
hugs to you all. I mean, it's been so lovely seeing your faces. And I know everyone watching this recording will just have had a wonderful evening. And it's the next best thing we could do to actually meeting up, as we would have done what we did this weekend last year.
Yeah.
We were there.
Yeah.
But I will take away your picture, Chris, of us being like the virus in the world. You know, we are little coronaviruses. But also that wonderful picture that Dave just gave us of the fallow field.
Yeah.
That, you know, we've had a year or 2 years perhaps by the end of lying fallow, and what wonderful crops might spring from it. I think that's a wonderful image to end on.
Yeah.
So because Ian is very patiently recording all this and needs to go away and do his thing, can I just end by saying thank you so much for contributing your time, and I know it will be so appreciated by all our viewers, and it's been wonderful, people. It's so sad to say goodbye, but soon we will meet and hug and keep on hugging.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
I miss
Nice to
everybody
see
too. See you along the road.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.